Now that VHS has officially come to an end, I've decided to make one last video to explain the rest of what deserves to be talked about. This information doesn't only come from me as a former rewinder, but also several other former rewinders, former mods, and even once players. Of course, because all of our NDAs have ended, there's information in this video that was exchanged between our groups as rewinders and mods that none of us are privy to. I wasn't even expecting to make a full video with what little information I had prior to interviewing a handful of other people. Therefore, this video will be a heavy one with lots of details, some of which I'm sure many of you will find disturbing. Let me start by saying Harper is a pseudonym. It's not an actual person that was in the VHS community, but at one point when VHS was still alive, one of the newer devs newly destroyed Hellbent. This person presented themselves as a very energetic and outgoing individual, leading them to gaining lots of popularity amongst VHS community members. But after they leaked the word rewinder before the rewinder program itself was fully released, they were put on a probationary period. And after this person gained so much trust, they suddenly went rogue. They proceeded to create a small Discord group with other mods and leak entire, and I mean entire, heaps of content. This included upcoming monsters, maps, items, cosmetics, balance changes, and much more. Even more disturbing, they leaked actual sensitive Hellbent employee information. This included full names, addresses, numbers, and more. Harper even talked about how they could easily ruin Hellbent with this information. And at the time, the other mods that were exposed to Harper going rogue felt trapped as they couldn't tell the other devs because who knows what this person might leak or might do with the information that they had. And although I wasn't personally in the situation, I mean, you can only imagine how shocking and awful it'd be to witness someone with that much power turn into a monster. Eventually, they were reported and subsequently fired. There was no announcement made about this, however, other than informing players that Harper had left Hellbent on their own accord. Immediately after, Harper seemed to just be absent across all socials, so it seems as if once they were pressed for legal action, they just dropped everything, thankfully. This led to a severe mistrust between the long-standing VHS devs and the VHS moderators, and mod permissions were severely cut. That, and they also explicitly refused to replace the role of Harper as a dev going forward. Similarly, as I mentioned in my previous video, when community manager Sam Gee left, she was also not fully replaced. They had Shills, aka Sid, doing announcements, but they were a dev, not the actual community manager. And I'd assume the reason as to why they didn't replace Sam could only be due to financial reasons. When reaching out to a particular mod after these events happened, they say that communication was practically non-existent and they were left in the dark about many things. I was told they had the communication level of an ordinary Discord member from what they used to have. Which, understandably so, is frustrating. Sure, they can actually moderate the Discord community, but there was no pipeline for communication from the devs to the player base, which was a huge loss. And sadly enough, I was also told that mods had such little importance at one point to where the mod chat would be empty for days to even weeks. Mods were also not allowed to playtest, they were not allowed to be rewinders simultaneously, nor even be in the rewinder Discord, making them feel even less important. But also, despite rewinders specifically having great influence and constant communication with the devs, some of the arguably best advice was continuously ignored. This included suggestions for advertising the game, a roadmap, and further balance changes for Monster to alleviate pain points. These are obviously pretty self-explanatory, but the roadmap itself could have bridged communication without the hassle of divulging too much information. And funnily enough with the roadmap, it was actually the first wave of rewinders that were pushing for the roadmap to be released, but once the second wave of rewinders was signed on, they immediately disagreed with the opportunity for us to have one, and thus, the roadmap was just lost. That and not having any advertising and relying solely on content creators by far hurt the game the most in my opinion. Many only knew of the game by word of mouth in tight circles, whereas if there was even a small budget for advertising, it could have grown much more outside of that and kept the game alive. On the flip side, mods were also communicating multiple times that the player base was stressed due to Monster being such a difficult role. However, once the devs were informed, they simply said that they wanted the game to be rather competitive as they thought it was fun in that regard. There were also lots of empty promises, as there was supposed to be an updated tutorial, but nothing ever came from it. There were also supposed to be mod-specific cosmetics, but nothing ever came from that either. Rewinders were also picked and thrown in to boost the game's popularity, but were not approved by previous rewinders, despite us being told that we could have a say. This was odd because we interacted with the community a lot, just like mods, so many of us knew who had done some rather unsavory things and who hadn't. For example, the second wave of rewinders left many confused, but especially because one of them was rather problematic. It wasn't publicly known, but the rewinder in question was put in a bad spotlight for two particular reasons. One of them involved bad-mouthing our contestant participants, but even worse was them bad-mouthing the previous community manager, Sam Gee, across multiple discords, but also mods. This included saying Sam wasn't a real part of the dev team and that she and other mods were doing a terrible job, yada yada. But as soon as Sam joined one of the discords to defend herself, their narrative changed. So then later being rewarded with rewinder status after bad-mouthing the backbone of VHS's community especially, felt awkward and plain wrong. More than anything though, it was shocking since neither rewinders nor mods had a say like we were supposed to. This led to bad tensions. Lastly, since the beginning, multiple mods were trying their best to get devs to implement accessibility features in the game for those that were hard of hearing, for color blindness, and also for translations. They apparently even had a company hired before VHS reached beta, but just did not utilize them. But the reason as to why these things were rejected so many times was because it wasn't important to them and they never finished the technical things and they never finished the lore. I honestly don't know what to say to that except for, really? But moving on. The devs also had a history of ignoring valid complaints and reports from mods, rewinders, and the player base. These weren't just simple things either. Again, I'm not naming the person, but there was someone at the time that repeatedly used the R slur, targeted players, especially rewinders, and despite several rewinders reporting them, but also mods and also the player base, nothing was done. For example, here's just one audio clip of some of the things that they would say.
Actually, no, I'm getting off. Loser, get banned, you brain dead retard.
It's pretty bad, but again, this is just one example. There was also the situation with the rewinder who was revealed to be a predator as well, because another player exposed him previously due to their discomfort, but the dev's response was that they couldn't necessarily do anything because they didn't do anything in-game. Some weeks later, the player came forward with the information publicly, and despite already being made aware of said rewinder, the devs claimed they had no idea, yet doubled down on their previous response, taking no action. It wasn't until it became a major concern on Twitter that the devs decided to suspend the rewinder, then terminate them. You can find more about this with my previous VHS video as well. And despite this user actually taking action in private, Hellbent consistently ignored them. But no matter how right that user was, the VHS community still gave them flack. There were also comments left in the VHS Rewinder Discord by several rewinders, but also a dev during the time of the dress incident. If you don't know about the dress incident, it was basically where I created a concept for my own rewinder cosmetic for the devs to implement. However, I left the rewinder program on my own accord, thus nullifying the use of the cosmetic since I was no longer a rewinder. However, instead of scrapping the cosmetic, or at minimum asking for my consent to use it, they implemented it into the game anyways for purchase with real money. I did the job of a concept artist, had my concept watered down, and got nothing, not even credit. I publicly posted to confront the devs, in which they responded that they were indeed in the wrong and that I should have been asked first. You can find out more information about that whole thing from my previous VHS video too, but moving on. It was with the help of the VHS mods that I got such an efficient response after posting about it, so thank you to them. But as for the rewinders, out of all of them, only 2 or so tried standing up for me, in which they seemed to be ignored by the others. But out of all of them, there are particular 3 I'd like to address. I'll address them not by names, but by their comments instead, so they'll know who they are. And I'm gonna be real, the second some of these people signed an NDA, some fancy shit they'd never seen before, their egos got big. Real big. But I'm here to burst your bubble. You are not that big of a deal. Humble yourself. To the rewinder that said, maybe we could get her in trouble and try to get her on the fact that she violated her NDA. Get me on what? This implies that I leaked unknown information when the information was already out there the second they fucking published my design. But you want me to get in trouble when I'm the one that got wronged? I find this to be one of the funniest ones, considering this individual constantly tries to make their way into my spaces. Please stop acting like you care when you don't. You probably never cared, and if you did, it was more than likely for your own gain and nothing else. But you can respect what I'm saying and leave me alone, or don't. But I'm giving you the chance to save yourself the embarrassment. You can drop the act now. To the reminder that said, you know she won't stop there. She's gonna want money. First of all, let's be real. Because what money? You and I both know good and damn well VHS didn't have any money to throw away. But I didn't even want money. I wanted my work to be respected and not profited off of. But I didn't even get the chance to consent to having it used. I did more favors for VHS than VHS ever did for me. But I was okay with that because I genuinely enjoyed the game and I wanted to see it succeed. I was fine before VHS, during VHS, and very much so after VHS. I don't think I can say the same for you. And to the dev that said, suck it, you left? You knew you were in the wrong, but you persisted behind the scenes anyway. Super professional and super classy. And in addition to that, the failure of your game resulted in unnecessary heartbreak from those that you employed, but also those that dedicated so much time playing and investing in your game. I hope you know that. So if you want to know why I had no remorse during my campaign against Hellbent and VHS when my concept was wrongfully stolen, this is why. They didn't care and were actively participating in the mockery of me with people they partnered with, but be kind, rewind, right? I knew it for a good amount of time, but I couldn't say anything prior due to the game still running and the fact that I still had an NDA on me. Until now. There's also a bonus part where there was actually a dev that seemed to be rather flirtatious towards a lot of women in the VHS gaming space, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. Just know that plenty of women did find that person predatory, and even if you were to think just a little, you'd probably recognize who it is. And after everything that VHS and its community went through, ultimately, devs decided that the original VHS server would remain closed, despite mods repeatedly asking to keep it alive. And I was explained to you that this decision especially hurt because there was no real other home for VHS's legacy that would be nearly as recognizable as the official Discord server. A community heavily cultivated by the backbone of mods' hard work, and the community interest was rejected, leaving no lore, no art, no videos, no tributes, nothing. Devs also denied keeping VHS alive via dedicated players who could easily continue to play VHS offline. They denied giving the tools to continue where it was left off. They denied passing VHS onto another company, and more. A sad, bitter end. VHS made a lot of mistakes and undeniably mismanaged their game, but I still enjoyed the time that I had with VHS. Before VHS came along, it had been a long time since I had such an interest in a game. The concept of the game, the art in terms of character design, cosmetics, environment, and effects, the music, and overall feel of the game was nothing short of incredible. The artists of the game I especially feel for. They had no say in a lot of the decisions that the higher-ups made, but it is what it is. But all of their efforts into VHS merely went down the drain with nothing to preserve it, making it gone forever.